everybody. As promised, I'm making another video to kind of help you as you go through and read the things they carry. Today we're going to talk about the chapter that is titled On the Rainy River. And in this chapter, it's important for you to know that a lot of this chapter is flashback. Tim O'Brien is going to flash back to before he was in Vietnam and predominantly focus on how he reacted to the news that he was being drafted and sent to Vietnam. Okay, so as you read this chapter, I want you to keep that in mind. He talks about being a young man at this time. If you go through, you'll notice in that very first paragraph, I highlighted the word courage because I noticed that that word is repeated several times in that first paragraph. And so when you're looking for big ideas or main ideas in a text, in a chapter, as a good reader, one thing you should be on the lookout for are words or ideas that repeat. So one of those that you could jot down in your assignment right here would be the word courage, especially if you see it again and again throughout this section of the text, throughout this chapter. Okay, so in the second paragraph, he talks about graduating from Lancaster College, and it was here that he was drafted to fight in a war he hated, and that he was 21 years old. Okay, so really think about that as you're reading this chapter. And I know you're all sitting in this room 16, maybe 17 years old. 21's not that far away. And you're not going to feel a whole lot older when you're 21 than when you do now. And so think about how he felt. He went through college, finally graduated, was looking forward to starting his life, and gets this notice. So he talks a lot about how he was feeling here, and the fact that he didn't even really know what this war was about and why we were over there. Okay, now when you go through this chapter, you're also going to notice that there are a lot of terminology, a lot of military terms used, and a lot of specific historical terms. He's talking about the Geneva Accords here. You might not know what that is. You probably don't know what that is. He's talking about all these places, and these are all related to the Vietnam era. Okay, so it can get a little overwhelming with all of these different terms, but do the best you can to get through those and to really focus on the story that he's telling. Okay. Now he says that in the beginning, back in college, he had taken a modest stand against the war, nothing radical, nothing crazy, but he just kind of was like, yeah, I'm not really for the war. Okay? And again, he goes back, he tells us again, the draft notice arrives June 17th, 1968. Now, that was a year after I was born. Okay, so I was a year old when he's talking about this, just so you can get a little bit of context as far as how far away that was or how recent that was. Okay, again, he's talking a lot about his parents and how he felt and what's going on. Right? This whole chapter is about him coming to terms with what he was going to have to do, where he was going to have to go. Okay, so as you're reading this chapter, I want you to concentrate on what you think are the main ideas that he is talking about here. So again, looking for those repeated ideas or phrases, looking maybe for some words that are significantly powerful as far as negative or positive, maybe looking at the imagery that he uses. He's a master of imagery, and so we're going to really get into the imagery as we get into this chapter. In our next unit, we're going to be looking at how the author Tim O'Brien tells this story, how he puts his words together, what types of words he uses, because we're really going to be examining the language, since this is a an AP language class. We're looking at the way in which he writes, not just the story he tells, but the craft of how he tells it. Okay, so as you're reading this idea of the pig becomes kind of important. Okay, so maybe keep your eyes peeled for the images that he's using when he talks about the job he has in this slaughterhouse. Okay, again, you'll see the word pig here too, so you'll know that is a major idea that he's trying to communicate to us. Not so much the pig itself, but what that represents in his story, because it does have a bigger meaning than just an actual pig or a factory. Okay. All right, so he tells us here that he was really considering running away from the draft notice. Okay, as many young men did. They did think about running away. They didn't want to go to Vietnam. They didn't want to go die in a country that they didn't know and for reasons that they didn't really understand. And so he talks about his own feelings of that. And so you're going to read that and find out what happens as he's telling us this story. He talks a lot about truth. And so maybe you want to focus a little bit on that as well. Like, what is he talking about when he says, I have never told the full truth? Because if you go back to the very beginning of this chapter, he tells us how he's never told this story to anyone before, not even his wife. So he has yet to tell the full truth of his life to the people closest to him. But for some reason now he's decided that he wants to put it out there in the book that he's writing. Okay, so he's driving here. He's going to be telling us about what he's doing. And I'm sorry if I'm making you dizzy by moving the page, but I'm trying. Elroy becomes a sort of mentor to Tim during this summer before he leaves for Vietnam. Now, of course, we know he ultimately does go because he's there in the war. Okay, so ask yourself, what does Elroy have to do with the story, and why is he included in this story? What might Tim O'Brien want us to understand? And then we're going to go here. This is a kind of a long chapter. This is the bigger of the 3 chapters that you're having to read. See, Elroy again is here, so a lot of this is about his conversation with this old man and how significant this relationship was to him during this time in his life. We'll all have times in our lives where people really influence us and maybe help us make decisions or help us to decide things that we shouldn't do. And Elroy is really that in some ways to Tim. And so keep your mind thinking about this relationship and why Tim O'Brien decided to include it in this chapter. Okay, and why he's never revealed this story to anybody. Like, why is this story so intense? What is he revealing to us in this story that is so shocking, perhaps, that he could never reveal it to anybody? And why did he never tell anybody? And then maybe what does that reveal to us about him a little bit? But for this assignment, you are working on the big ideas, and you are working on writing 5 or more sentences that tells us what you think the author is trying to teach us about life. So maybe he's trying to teach us something about life in general, thinking about the Vietnam War there, or human nature. So I just got a notice on my computer that I'm almost out of time with this video. I hope this helps you a little bit. Make sure that you give text evidence to support when you get to that reflection part. If you think this is telling you a lesson about something, tell me where in the text you see that. All right, you guys, I hope this helps. I hope you are enjoying the read, and I look forward to sharing with you Monday about what you've all been thinking about the story. Have a good weekend.